Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Now I will tell you about one of the most amazing cities, its history and some interesting facts. New York City is the largest and most influential American metropolis, encompassing Manhattan and Staten Islands, the western sections of Long Island, and a small portion of the New York State mainland to the north of Manhattan. New York City is in reality a collection of many neighborhoods scattered among the city's 5 boroughs: Manhattan, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Queens, and Staten Island, each exhibiting its own lifestyle. Moving from one city neighborhood to the next may be like passing from one country to another. New York is the most populous and the most international city in the country. Its urban area extends into adjoining parts of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Located where the Hudson and East Rivers empty into one of the world's premier harbors, New York is both the gateway to the North American continent and its preferred exit to the oceans of the globe. Area 305 square miles, 790 square kilometers. Population 8 million. New York is the most ethnically diverse, religiously varied, commercially driven, famously congested, and, in the eyes of many, the most attractive urban center in the country. No other city has contributed more images to the collective consciousness of Americans. Wall Street means finance, Broadway is synonymous with theater, Fifth Avenue is automatically paired with shopping, Madison Avenue means the advertising industry, Greenwich Village connotes bohemian lifestyles, 7th Avenue signifies fashion. Tammany Hall defines machine politics, and Harlem evokes images of the Jazz Age, African American aspirations, and slums. The word tenement brings to mind both the miseries of urban life and the upward mobility of striving immigrant masses. New York has more Jews than Tel Aviv, more Irish than Dublin, more Italians than Naples, and more Puerto Ricans than San Juan. Its symbol is the Statue of Liberty, but the metropolis is itself an icon, the arena in which Emma Lazarus's tempest-tossed people of every nation are transformed into Americans, and if they remain in the city, they become New Yorkers. For the past 2 centuries, New York has been the largest and wealthiest American city. More than half the people and goods that ever entered the United States came through its port, and that stream of commerce has made change a constant presence in city life. New York always meant possibility, for it was an urban center on its way to something better, a metropolis too busy to be solicitous of those who stood in the way of progress. New York, while the most American of all the country's cities, thus also achieved a reputation as both foreign and fearsome, a place where turmoil, arrogance, incivility, and cruelty tested the stamina of everyone who entered it. The city was inhabited by strangers, but they were, as James Fenimore Cooper explained, essentially national in interest, position, pursuits. No one thinks of the place as belonging to a particular state but to the United States. Once the capital of both its state and the country, New York surpassed such status to become a world city in both commerce and outlook, with the most famous skyline on earth. It also became a target for international terrorism, most notably the destruction in 2001 of the World Trade Center, which for 3 decades had been the most prominent symbol of the city's global prowess. However, New York remains for its residents a conglomeration of local neighborhoods that provide them with familiar cuisines, languages, and experiences. Sections of the granite bedrock of New York date to about 100 million years ago, but the topography of the present city is largely the product of the glacial recession that marked the end of the Wisconsin glacial stage about 10,000 years ago. Great erratic boulders in Manhattan's Central Park, deep kettle depressions in Brooklyn and Queens, and the glacial moraine that remains in parts of the metropolitan area provide silent testimony to the enormous power of the ice. Glacial retreat also carved out the waterways around the city. The Hudson and East Rivers, Spuyten Duyvil Creek, and Arthur Kill are, in reality, estuaries of the Atlantic Ocean, and the Hudson is tidal as far north as Troy. The approximately 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers, of New York shoreline are locked in constant combat with the ocean, as it erodes the land and adds new sediments elsewhere. Although the harbor is constantly dredged, ship channels are continually filled with river silt and are too shallow for more modern deep-sea vessels. Climate and plant and animal life. The average temperature in January is about 31 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius, and in June about 72 degrees Fahrenheit, 22 degrees Celsius, but recorded temperature extremes range from -15 to 106 degrees Fahrenheit, -26 to 41 degrees Celsius. Because of New York's moderate climate, the harbor rarely freezes. The annual precipitation is 44 inches, 1,120 millimeters. The city's flora and fauna are testimony to the rapid changes in the ecosystem imposed by urban settlement. In areas that once were hunting and fishing paradises for several bands of Native Americans, the most prevalent animals today are the cockroach and the Norway rat, both introduced to the city via trade with Europe. A wide variety of animal species are still found within the city, including 80 species of fish, scores of birds from the peregrine falcon to the pigeon, and such mammals as the raccoon and the occasional urban coyote. Wildlife refuges at Jamaica Bay and in Clove Lakes, Staten Island, and Alley Pond, Queens, parks provide sanctuaries for many species, allowing them to survive even within an unfavorable city environment. Vegetation has sufficient precipitation but has been reduced and destroyed with the advance of urban sprawl. The dominant characteristics of contemporary city plants are their ability to thrive despite acid rain and air that contains large components of ozone, vehicle emissions, and industrial byproducts. However, the city's two botanical gardens, one in the Bronx and the other in Brooklyn. More than 30 million tourists visit New York annually, but most of these rarely see much beyond the 22.6 square miles of Manhattan Island, the smallest city borough. Divided by 12 north-south avenues and crossed by 220 east-west streets, Manhattan is easily understood and infinitely alluring. It is the original New York, boasts the world's largest collection of skyscrapers, and is overloaded with cultural institutions and places of enduring interest. Even to residents of the other boroughs, Manhattan is the city, the administrative, business, and financial center of the metropolis and the basis of their renown. In no other part of New York are there such stark contrasts between rich and poor. The high-rise elegance of Park Avenue and the Upper East Side rapidly gives way to the teeming streets of Harlem to the north and to the crowded bohemian existence of the Lower East Side and Greenwich Village to the south. This cruel modern dichotomy echoes the 19th century city, where industrial millionaires lived in luxury in Fifth Avenue mansions, now largely converted into cultural centers, far from the immigrant masses on the Lower East Side, whose sufferings the Tenement Museum now honors. In a city that embraces change as its primary tradition, the shifting population base of New York remains its most dramatic story. At the end of the 20th century, representatives of some 200 national groups were counted among its people. While people of European ancestry still make up 1/3 of the population, Hispanics account for nearly 1/3, and African Americans about 1/4. The fastest growing component of the population is Asian, soaring from a tiny proportion in 1970 to more than 1/10 in the late 1990s. Dominicans were the most numerous immigrants during the last decade of the 20th century, but they were closely followed by Russians and Chinese, people yearning to make it. The Statue of Liberty, more than a century after its dedication in the harbor, 1886, continues to be the most powerful symbol of New York, as it welcomes newcomers into the city's Golden Door. Now 12 interesting facts about New York City. Who doesn't love the Big Apple? World Strides certainly does. We did some research into one of our favorite cities in the United States and learned 12 interesting facts about New York City you may not have known. A little over 8 million people live in New York City. That means 1 in every 38 people in the United States call the city home. More than 800 languages are spoken in New York City, making it the most linguistically diverse city in the world. 4 in 10 households speak a language other than English. Oysters were so popular in New York in the 19th century that the shells were used to pave Pearl Street. They were also used for lime for the masonry of the Trinity Church. France gifted the Statue of Liberty to the United States in 1886 for its centennial celebration. The statue was shipped as 350 pieces in 214 crates and took 4 months to assemble at its current home on Ellis Island. New York City's Federal Reserve Bank has the largest gold storage in the world. The vault is 80 feet below street level and contains $90 billion in gold. The New York Public Library has over 50 million books and other items and is the second largest library system in the nation after the Library of Congress. It is also the third largest library in the world. The United Nations headquarters was established in New York City in 1952 after World War II. The first pizzeria in the United States opened in NYC in 1895. Since the 1960s, the price of a slice of pizza has been roughly the same price as a subway ride, generating the idea of pizza principle among economists. The borough of Brooklyn alone would be the fourth largest city in the United States. Queens would also rank fourth nationally. Times Square is named after the New York Times. It was originally called Longacre Square until the Times moved there in 1904. New York City became the first capital of the United States in 1789. More Chinese people live in New York City than any other city outside of Asia. More Jewish people live there than any other city outside of Israel. That's all for today. Subscribe to the Magic Cities channel and stay with us. Good luck.